Well, hey there again, Manna family, and welcome to day 4. It is so good to be hanging out with you during your devotional time throughout this week. We have been looking at some spiritual disciplines as they are laid out really by Richard Foster in his book, Celebration of Discipline. Now, I don't think I am alone in this, but I have a hard time letting things function outside of my control. Some would call that OCD. Some might call that controlling. I would probably call that just having things the right way. I don't know. There is definitely an element of pride that goes along with that, though. So that makes submission an extremely important spiritual discipline to practice, because actually Proverbs 6 talks about the things that God detests, and the first thing that he says is haughty eyes, which is actually pride. So what does our example look like in the manner of practicing the spiritual discipline of submission? Well, of course, our example is Jesus. And in my opinion, there is no better place that designates this than Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, which says that Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Another place I love to see this is Matthew chapter 20. Starts in the second part of verse 26 and goes through 28. And it says, "But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." This is all clearly connected. The first being written about Jesus, and the second being Jesus' words. This is all connected with submission, because even as Jesus was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was submitting. He was practicing the act of submission to his Father's will. So for us, this means that we need to be a little less concerned about our own needs and wants. Instead, let us more fully seek God's will for our lives and submit to his will and his ways. You know, Richard Foster talks about this process in his book, Celebration of Discipline. I mentioned this yesterday. He states that submitting to God is not a loss of our own identity. It is actually quite the opposite. When we submit to him, when we submit to God, we find our identity in him. Foster then goes on to say that the only compelling reason we need for submission is because Jesus did it. There are many more layers and rabbit holes we could go down for this theme of submission, but the main point I want you to take away from this is that our main submission needs to start with submitting to God's will for our lives. And for many of us, that can be a hard step to take, and it might feel counterintuitive, but the amount of freedom you will experience will bless you each and every day. See you again tomorrow. God bless.